Okay, so welcome everybody. I have been having some issues with OBS, so I don't know. Yesterday's pre-pub chit chat, I also had the same problem with the starting, so it's kind of awkward. Anyway, welcome everybody to another chit chat. Not a chit chat, sorry. Another read along with the Chattering Magpie. We are continuing on with Jane Eyre and all of her adventures or misadventures over at Gateshead continue. So in the last session we had, she returned to her aunt's house. If you guys will remember, she was as a child she lived in her aunt's house, and the aunt didn't like her. Jane talked back to her one day and snapped, and the aunt sent her off to school. Now Jane returned to her aunt's house, saw her cousins. The merry-go-round of life happened, and now the aunt is in a terrible state, sick. Her son committed suicide after ruining the family. So, but the aunt did confess before dying about some wrong she had made Jane Eyre. Like, it was not enough that she cast her off. It was not enough that she hated Jane. She even did more stuff, even while Jane was already away at school. She received a letter from one of Jane's uncles from her paternal side, and who said, "Yo, where's Jane? I want to adopt her. I want to make her my heir once I die. Since I've had, my business has been good, and she's my only living relative, so I want to make her my family officially." And the good lady, what she told him, she's like, "No, Jane Eyre went to school, and she died in a typhus epidemic that happened there. So yeah, too bad." So this is what Aunt Reed wanted to confess before dying. She died soon after confessing this, never wanting to make up with Jane. Even though Jane forgave her, she never once wanted to love or be loved by Jane, and died hating Jane. Nobody cried over her except maybe Georgiana, I think her name. Yeah, Georgiana, one of her daughters. But Georgiana is more self-absorbed, and I think the crying just, Anyway, so that's what happened in the last read-along. Jane Eyre returns to Thornfield Hall in this read-along, in this session, and we will see what has been going on during her time away. But before that, she has to finish some things, just some unfinished business with her. Well, not even unfinished business. She stays a little longer, but we'll see about that. But before we do, let me just say hello to the folks on the chat. Early gang, especially Akihana. I know you're sleeping at this very moment. May you have sweet dreams and wake up to see the light of a bright new day and listen to this read along and enjoy it. So here, have all of my love. There you go. Says, "Hi Magpie, I enjoyed watching the replay of last night's pre-pub." Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it. We had a lot of fun, and unfortunately we had to cut it short. Yeah, we went like an hour and 20 or something, and I had to cut some parts of it. So unfortunately, yeah, that's what happens when we get too excited. But it was about Ferdinand. Come on, we had to focus a lot on Ferdinand, and I do not regret anything. Looking forward to watching this session's replay. Still can't forget Rochester's cross-dressing from 2 sessions ago, dude. I can't forget it either, especially with the meme that I still okay, you guys. I still remember that meme, that little purple butterfly made of when Mr. Rochester dressed up as a gypsy woman. And I had forgotten about this part in Robin Hood from the Disney movie, where they literally dress up as gypsies to fool Prince John about trying to rob him. And yes, They were as grotesque as I'm sure Rochester looked when he tried to cross-dress as a gypsy woman. Let's see. Question here. I also wonder if Rochester will help Jane contact her uncle. Ooh, yeah, I hope he does. I'm sure he has more resources on hand to be able to reach out. And what do you suppose Bessie and her husband will do now that their employer has climbed the towering staircase? That's a good question. So back in the day, back in the day, they used to kind of just all live in the neighborhood like all their life. So if they didn't have job in the big house, that was a big problem. Why? Because the big house was like the biggest employer in the areas. So you guys, the fact that John ruined the family and that the family is quite likely going to close up the house now, that means so many people are left without employment. And this is seen as a very irresponsible thing, because when you are a landed gentry, you're basically a steward of that place. You make sure that the people have somewhere to go, not somewhere to go, somewhere to be employed. And if, let's say, for example, you are too poor and you have to rent out your house, it is understood that the next person coming in to the house will hire from within the neighborhood. So hopefully they rent out the house, and the new people that are going to be renting the house have them hired from within the county or the village. Hopefully that's what's gonna happen. Otherwise, they're just gonna, at least hopefully they got some letters of recommendation so they can go look for jobs elsewhere. But yeah, this is also another aspect of what makes the Reeds so irresponsible, so selfish, is that they drove not just their own personal ruin, but the livelihoods of other people that depend on them are also in jeopardy. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Hopefully, though, Bessie and her husband, though, are okay. They didn't seem to be like in any like stress or like wondering like, oh gosh, what's gonna happen to us. So I think they're an intelligent lot. They'll find their way. It would be interesting though if they start working for Jane. I don't know if they could, or maybe Rochester. Maybe Rochester, he has a house. Jane doesn't. Jane can only live, she's only a governess. So we'll see. Okay. Little Butterfly says, hello. Hi, Butterfly. Happy to see you here. I have so many thoughts of what happened last week. Please share all of your thoughts in the chat. I can't wait to read them out loud here. It's perfect time to read them all. Or if not, you can always put the comments on the previous video. I don't think it has any comments in there. Poor thing. So do share them. I love to read your thoughts. There was a lot to talk about with that tender reunion with Mrs. Reed. And hi Remy says hello. Says I'll be studying here. Have a good stream. Okay. Hope you enjoy it and do your best. Ganbatte. Do the studying things, and I hope that you have what class is it for, by the way? I was gonna say that you are able to pass your exams or whatever. Like here in the States, it's almost like already the end of the semester. So are you in a quarter system, or how's that go for you? All right. So I think it's good time to get started with Jane Eyre. I think I already gave the rundown on what happened in the previous live, and we'll just pick up. All right. Hi Remy. We'll I hope that you do good on your exams and don't let the read distract you too much. Oh, a math degree. Wow, impressive. Hooray for STEM degrees! I was also a STEM major. You wouldn't know it, but I was. Yeah, I was an engineering major. I graduated civil engineering. So, yep, I know the struggle. All right, everybody, let's get this started. Let's read some Jane Eyre, picking up from where we left off. There we go. Okay. Mr. Rochester had given me but 1 week's leave of absence, yet a month elapsed before I quitted Gateshead. Dang, girl, a month. I wished to leave immediately after the funeral, but Georgiana entreated me to stay till she could get off to London, whither she was now at last invited by her uncle, Mr. Gibson, who had come down to direct his sister's interment and settle the family affairs. Georgiana said she dreaded being left alone with Eliza. From her she got neither sympathy in her dejection, support in her fears, nor aid in her preparations. So I bore with her feeble-minded wailings and selfish lamentations as well as I could, and did my best in sewing for her and packing her dresses. It is true that while I worked, she would idle, and I thought to myself, if you and I were destined to live always together, cousin, we would commence matters on a different footing. I should not settle tamely down into being the forbearing party. I would assign you your share of labor, and compel you to accomplish it, or else it would be left undone. I should insist also on your keeping some of these drawling, half-insincere complaints hushed in your own breast. It is only because of our connection happens to be very transitory, and comes at a peculiarly mournful season, that I consent thus to render it so patient and compliant on my part. At last I saw Georgiana off, but now it was Eliza's turn to request me to stay another week. Her plans required all her time and attention, she said. She was about to depart for some unknown bourne, and all day long she stayed in her own room, her door bolted within, filling trunks, emptying drawers, burning papers, and holding no communication with anyone. She wished me to look after the house, to see callers, and answer notes of condolence. One morning she told me I was at liberty. And, she added, I am obliged to you for your valuable services and discreet conduct. There is some difference between living with such as one as you and with Georgiana. You perform your own part in life and burden no one. Tomorrow, she continued, I set out for the continent. I shall take up my abode in a religious house near Lisle, a nunnery, you would call it. There I shall be quiet and unmolested. I shall devote myself for a time to the examination of the Roman Catholic dogmas and to a careful study of the workings of their system. If I find it to be, as I half suspect it is, the one best calculated to ensure the doing of all things decently and in order, I shall embrace the tenets of Rome and probably take the veil. I neither expressed surprise at this resolution nor attempted to dissuade her from it. The vocation will fit you to a hair, I thought. Much good may it do to you. When we parted, she said, Goodbye, cousin Jane Eyre. I wish you well. You have some sense. Oh, high praise. I then returned, You are not without sense, cousin Eliza. But what you have, I suppose, in another year will be walled up alive in a French convent. However, it is not my business, and so it suits you. I don't much care. You are in the right, said she, and with these words we each went our separate way. As I shall not have occasion to refer either to her or her sister again, I may as well mention here that Georgiana made an advantageous match with a wealthy, worn-out man of fashion, and that Eliza, actually took the veil and is at this day superior of the convent where she passed the period of her novitiate and which she endowed with her fortune. Mm. So Georgiana went on to marry some rich old fogey. Eliza went on to become a nun, literally a nun, and is now Mother Superior in her convent. Um, Again, what people do crazy things with their life. You know what? Who is one to judge, I suppose? All right. I half jokingly said to my mom one time, like, yeah, I think a life of reclusivity and just, having like a very organized day, just habits and routines is a very good fit for me, and it is. But I don't know about being shut away as a nun. I don't know. Can I have like anyway? So I don't know. Like I can't say that George Eliza's life is going to be so very awful because there are some people who thrive on that kind of life. I have suspect that I would like a little bit more of that, just being able to have like some structure. I thrive in structure. Uh um but then again, I would not like to be a nun. I would not like to be shut away from the world forever. More power to her. As for Georgiana, well, that's actually what she wanted, right? She wanted to marry somebody rich, so good for her. Good for everybody here. Um, let's see. All right, so Little Butterfly says at work, so I will have to share my thoughts later. Okay, no problem. Let's continue on. How people feel when they are returning home from an absence, long or short, I did not know. I had never experienced the sensation. I had known what it was like to come back to Gateshead when a child after a long walk, to be scolded for looking cold or gloomy, and later, what it was to come back from church to Lowood, to long for a plenteous meal and a good fire, and to be unable to get either. Neither of these returnings was very pleasant or desirable. No magnet drew me to a given point, increasing in its strength of attraction the nearer I came. The return to Thornfield was yet to be tried. My journey seemed tedious, very tedious. 50 miles one day, a night spent at an inn. 50 miles the next day. During the first 12 hours, I thought of Mrs. Reed in her last moments. I saw her disfigured and discolored face, and heard her strangely altered voice. I mused on the funeral day, the coffin, the hearse, the black train of tenants and the servants. Few was the number of relatives, the gaping vault, the silent church, the solemn service. Then I thought of Eliza and Georgiana. I beheld one the cynosure of a ballroom, the other the inmate of a convent cell, and I dwelt on and analyzed their separate peculiarities of person and character. The evening arrival at the great town of Blank scattered these thoughts. Night gave them quite another turn. Lay down on my traveller's bed, I left reminiscence for anticipation. I was going back to Thornfield, but how long was I to stay there? Not long, of that I was sure. I had heard from Mrs. Fairfax in the interim of my absence. The party at the Hall was dispersed. Mr. Rochester had left for London 3 weeks ago, but he was then expected to return in a fortnight. Mrs. Fairfax surmised that he was gone to make arrangements for his wedding, as he had talked of purchasing a new carriage. She said the idea of his marrying Miss Ingram still seemed strange to her, but from what everybody said, and from what she herself had seen, she could no longer doubt that the event would shortly take place. "You would be strangely incredulous if you did doubt it," was my mental comment. "I don't doubt it." The question followed. Where was I to go? I dreamt of Miss Ingram all the night. In a vivid morning dream, I saw her closing the gates of Thornfield against me and pointing me out another road, and Mr. Rochester looked on, with his arms folded, smiling sardonically, as it seemed, at both her and me. I had not notified to Mrs. Fairfax the exact day of my return, for I did not wish either car or carriage to meet me at Millcote. I proposed to walk the distance quietly by myself, and very quietly, after leaving my box in the ostler's care, did I slip away from the George Inn, about 6 o'clock of a June evening, and take the old road to Thornfield, a road which lay chiefly through fields, and was now little frequented. It was not a bright or splendid summer evening, though fair and soft. The haymakers were at work all around the road, and the sky, though far from cloudless, was such as promised well for the future. Its blue, where blue was visible, was mild and settled, and its cloud strata high and thin. The west, too, was warm. No watery gleam chilled it. It seemed as if there was a fire lit, an altar burning behind its screen of marbled vapor, and out of apertures shone a golden redness. I felt glad as the road shortened before me, so glad that I stopped once to ask myself what that joy meant, and to remind reason that it was not my home I was going, or to a permanent resting place, or to a place where fond friends looked out for me and waited my arrival. Mrs. Fairfax will smile you a calm welcome, to be sure, said I, and little Adele will clap her hands and jump to see you. But you know very well you are thinking of another than they, and that he is not thinking of you. But you know very well you are thinking of another than they, and that he is not thinking of you. But what is so headstrong as youth? What is so blind as inexperience? These affirmed that it was pleasure enough to have the privilege of again looking on Mr. Rochester, whether he looked on me or not, and they added, Hasten, hasten! Be with him while you may, but a few more days or weeks at most, and you are parted from him forever. And then I strangled a newborn agony, a deformed thing which I could not persuade myself to own and rear, and ran on. They are making hay, too, in Thornfield meadows, or rather, the labourers are just quitting their work, and returning home with their rakes on their shoulders, now, at the hour that I arrive. I have but a field or two to traverse, and then I shall cross the road and reach the gates. How full the hedges are of roses! But I have no time to gather any. I want to be at the house. I pass the tall briar, shooting leafy and flowery branches across the path. I see the narrow stile with stone steps, and I see Mr. Rochester sitting there, a book and a pencil in his hand. He is writing. Well, he is not a ghost, yet every nerve I have is unstrung. For a moment I am beyond my own mastery. What does it mean? I do not think I should tremble in this way when I saw him, or lose my voice, or the power of motion in his presence. I will go back as soon as I can stir. I need not make an absolute fool of myself. I know another way to the house. It does not signify if I knew 20 ways, for he has seen me. Hello, he cries, and he puts up his book and his pencil. There you are. Come on, if you please. I suppose I do come on, though in what fashion I know not, being scarcely cognizant of my movements, and solicitous only to appear calm, and above all, to control the working muscles of my face, which I feel rebel insolently against my will, and struggle to express that what I had resolved to conceal. But I have a veil. It is down. I may make shift yet to behave with decent composure. And is this Jane Eyre? Are you coming from Millcote, and on foot? Yes, just one of your tricks, not to send for a carriage and come clattering over street and road like a common mortal, but to steal into the vicinage of your home along with twilight, just as if you were a dream or a shade. What the deuce have you done with yourself this last month? I have been with my aunt, sir, who is dead. A true Janian reply. Good angels be my guard. She comes from the other world, from the abode of people who are dead, and tells me so when she meets me alone here in the gloaming. If I dared, I'd touch you, to see if you're substance or shadow, you elf. But I'd as soon offered to take hold of a blue ignis fatuus light in March. Truant, truant, he added when he had paused an instant, absent from me a whole month, and forgetting me quite, I'll be sworn. I knew there would be pleasure in meeting my master again, even though broken by the fear that he was so soon to cease to be my master, and by the knowledge that I was nothing to him. But there was ever in Mr. Rochester, or so I at least thought, such a wealth of the power of communicating happiness, that to taste but of the crumbs he scattered to stray and stranger birds like me was to feast genially. His last words were balm. They seemed to imply that it imported something to him, whether I forgot him or not. And he had spoken of Thornfield as my home. Would that it were my home! He did not leave this style, and I hardly liked to ask to go by. I inquired soon if he had not been to London. Yes, I suppose you found that out by second sight. Mrs. Fairfax told me in a letter. And did she inform you what I went to do? Oh, yes, sir. Everybody knew your errand. You must see the carriage, Jane, and tell me if you don't think it will suit Mrs. Rochester exactly, and whether she won't look like Queen Boadicea leaning back against those purple cushions. I wish, Jane, I were a trifle better adapted to match her with her externally. Tell me now, fairy as you are, can't you give me a charm, a philter, or something of that sort to make me a handsome man? It would be past the power of magic, sir. Dang, Jane, what a roast. And in thought I added, a loving eye is all the charm needed. To such, you're handsome enough, or rather, your sternness has a power beyond beauty. Mr. Rochester had sometimes read my unspoken thoughts with an acumen to me incomprehensible. In the present instance, he took no notice of my abrupt vocal response, but he smiled at me with a certain smile he had of his own, and which he used but on rare occasions. He seemed to think it too good for common purposes. It was the real sunshine of feeling. He shed it over me now. Pass, Janet, said he, making room for me to cross the stile. Go up home, and stay your weary little wandering feet at a friend's threshold. All I had now to do was to obey him in silence. No need for me to colloquize further. I got over the stile without a word, and meant to leave him calmly. An impulse held me fast, and a force turned me around. I said, or something in me said for me, and in spite of me, thank you, Mr. Rochester, for your great kindness. I'm strangely glad to get back again to you, and wherever you are is my home, my only home. Oh boy, Jane! Oh, this is so cute and sad. Jane! I walked on so fast that even he could hardly have overtaken me had he tried. Little Adele was half wild with delight when she saw me. Mrs. Fairfax received me with her usual plain friendliness. Leah smiled, and even Sophie bid me bonsoir with glee. It was very pleasant. There is no happiness like that of being loved by your fellow creatures, and feeling that your presence is an addition to their comfort. I, that evening, shut my eyes resolutely against the future. I stopped my ears against the voice that kept warning me of near separation and coming grief. When tea was over, and Mrs. Fairfax had taken her knitting, and I had assumed a low seat near her, and Adele, kneeling on the carpet, had nestled up close to me, and a sense of mutual affection seemed to surround us with a ring of golden peace, I uttered a silent prayer that we might not be parted far or soon. But when, as we thus sat, Mr. Rochester entered, unannounced, and looking at us seemed to take pleasure in the spectacle of a group so amiable. When he said he supposed the old lady was all right now that she had got her adopted daughter back again, and added that he saw Adele was prêt à coquer sa petite maman anglaise, ready to love her little English mother, I half ventured to hope that he would, even after his marriage, keep us together somewhere under the shelter of his protection, and not quite exiled from the sunshine of his presence. A fortnight of dubious calm succeeded my return to Thornfield Hall. Nothing was said of the master's marriage, and I saw no preparation going on for such an event. Almost every day I asked Mrs. Fairfax if she had yet heard anything decided. Her answer was always in the negative. Once she said she had actually put a question to Mr. Rochester as to when he was going to bring his bride home, but he had answered her only by a joke and one of his queer looks, and she could not tell what to make of him. One thing especially surprised me, and that was there were no journeyings backwards and forwards, no visits to Ingram Park. To be sure, it was 20 miles off, on the borders of another county, but what was that distance to an ardent lover? To so practiced and forgive me, I cannot say that word. To so practiced and I give up, uncle. To so practiced as horseman as Mr. Rochester, it would be but a morning. No, I have to indefatigable. Sorry, you guys. I cannot rest till I get this.
Indefatigable. Indefatigable.
Indefatigable. Slow.
Indefatigable.
Indefatigable. Okay, got it. To so practiced and indefatigable. I'm sorry, you guys. I have to keep going. To be sure, it was but 20 miles off, on the borders of another county. But what was that distance to an ardent lover? To so practiced and indefatigable a horseman as Mr. Rochester, it would be but a morning's ride. I began to cherish hopes that I had no right to conceive, that the match was broken off, that rumor had been mistaken, that one or both parties had changed their minds. I used to look at my master's face to see if it were sad or fierce, but I could not remember the time when it had been so uniformly clear of clouds or evil feelings. If, in the moments I and my pupil spent with him, I lacked spirits and sank into inevitable dejection, he became even gay. Never had he called me more frequently to his presence, never been kinder to me when there. And alas, never had I loved him so well. End of chapter. Ooh, it's 10:30. Does that mean we get to go into the next chapter, you guys? Okay. For those of you who know, you know. This, yeah. Should I go into the next chapter? It's a big chapter. It's a pretty big chapter. So, do I dare do it? All right. Take care. Hi, Remy. Look, hope you enjoy the rewatch. Good to see you. Yes, English is hard indeed. But we can do it. Thank you, Google, for the pronunciation help. And you know what? Let's do it. Let's do next chapter. Why the heck not? So, but before we go into the next chapter, might as well kind of talk a little bit about what we just read. She says goodbye to her family, they're family, but they do not feel family. She goes back to Thornfield. She doesn't know how it will feel to return to Thornfield. Remember, she's never known like a warm home and like a place where she feels like she belongs, that she looks forward to returning to. That's the first time that she feels like anticipation of returning, and it's so lovely. It's so lovely described just from the way that she walks from the town by herself through the fields in the sunset and twilight to find Rochester there, alone, and we can almost say waiting for her. We would like to say he's waiting for her. I guess it was fate that put them two together at that time, at that hour of the evening. Anyway, so she recognizes that she's glad, strangely glad to be back at Thornfield, not just because, she's never known a home and Thornfield is not really her home, it's just where she works, but because of the people and especially the person that welcomes her when she arrives. Rochester is very clear in saying, like, this is your home and you're welcome here and I'm happy to see you here. And he does not he doesn't, I don't know, it's just he's not cold towards her. He's back in his own Rochester kind of way, and she appreciates the fact that he welcomes her. And yeah, so, but it's just like this, all these little things, she calls them, like, to him they're just crumbs of like affection or whatever, but to her, who has never known anything like a home or people to welcome her or to think of her as a friend or to want her to return quickly, like, she eats these things up, and it's so sad to see because she's such a good girl, you guys, and she's never been really cared for or loved, and it's so sad. So I hope that she can, I don't know, like, I hope that everything goes okay and that Rochester stops playing around with her. Anyway, so let's see what the next chapter says. So this is the point where it's like the tipping point. We know that Rochester's definitely going to get married. He even bought a carriage for his new wife. But so far, nothing. There's no, she doesn't discern anything, like what's going on. It's not like any engagement has been broken up because he doesn't look sad or angry. In fact, he seems to be like at peace. So what gives? Let's see what happens. All right, chapter 23. A splendid midsummer shone over England. Skies so pure, sun so radiant as were then seen in long succession. Seldom favor even singly our wave-girt land. It was as if a band of Italian days had come from the south, like a flock of glorious passenger birds, and lighted to rest them on the cliffs of Albion. The hay was all got in. The fields round Thornfield were green and shorn, the roads white and baked. The trees were in their dark prime. Hedge and wood, full-leaved and deeply tinted, contrasted well with the sunny hue of the cleared meadows between. On Midsummer Eve, Adele, weary with gathering wild strawberries in Hay Lane half the day, had gone to bed with the sun. I watched her drop asleep, and when I left her, I sought the garden. It was now the sweetest hour of the 24. Day its fervid fires had wasted, and dew fell cool on the plantain plain and scorched summit, where the sun had gone down in simple state, pure of the pomp of clouds, spread a solemn purple, burning with the light of red jewel and furnace flame at one point, one hill peak, and extending high and wide, soft and still softer, over half heaven. The east had its own charm, or fine deep blue, and its own modest gem, a casino and solitary star. Soon it would boast the moon, but she was yet beneath the horizon. I walked a while on the pavement, but a subtle, well-known scent, that of a cigar, stole from some window. I saw the library casement open a handbreadth. I knew I might be watched thence, so I went apart into the orchard. No nook in the grounds more sheltered and more Eden-like. It was full of trees. It bloomed with flowers. A very high wall shut it out from the court on one side. On the other, a beech avenue screened it from the lawn. At the bottom was a sunk fence, its sole separation from lonely fields. A winding walk bordered with laurels and terminating in a giant horse chestnut, circled at the base by a seat, led down to the fence. Here one could wander unseen. While such honeydew fell, such silence reigned, such gloaming gathered, I felt as if I could haunt such shade forever. But in treading the flower and fruit parterres at the upper part of the enclosure, enticed there by the light the now rising moon casts on this more open quarter, my step is stayed. Not by sound, not by sight, but once more by a warning fragrance. Sweetbriar and southernwood, jasmine, pink, and rose have long been yielding their evening sacrifice of incense. This new scent is neither of shrub nor flower. It is, I know it well, it is Mr. Rochester's cigar. I look round and I listen. I see trees laden with ripening fruit. I hear a nightingale warbling in a wood half a mile off. No moving form is visible, no coming step audible. But that perfume increases. I must flee. I make for the wicket leading into the shrubbery, and I see Mr. Rochester entering. I step aside into the ivy recess. He will not stay long. He will soon return where he came, and if I sit still, he will never see me. But no, eventide is as pleasant to him as to me, and this antique garden as attractive. And he strolls on, now lifting the gooseberry tree branches to look at the fruit, large as plums, with which they are laden, now taking a ripe cherry from the wall, now stooping towards a knot of flowers, either to inhale their fragrance or to admire their dew beads on their petals. A great moth goes humming by me. It alights on a plant at Mr. Rochester's foot. He sees it and bends to examine it. Now he has his back toward me, thought I. And he is occupied too. Perhaps if I walk softly, I can slip away unnoticed. I trod on an edging of turf that the crackle of the pebbly gravel might not betray me. He was standing among the beds a yard or two distant from where I had to pass. The moth apparently engaged him. I shall get by very well, I meditated. As I crossed his shadow, thrown long over the garden by the moon, not yet risen high, he said quietly without turning, Jane, come and look at this fellow. I had made no noise. He had no eyes behind. Could his shadow feel? I started at first, and then I approached him. Look at his wings, said he. He reminds me rather of a West Indian insect. One does not often see so large and gay a night rover in England. There, he has flown. The moth roamed away. I was sheepishly retreating also, but Mr. Rochester followed me, and when we reached the wicket, he said, Turn back. On so lovely a night, it is a shame to sit in the house, and surely no one can wish you to go to bed while sunset is thus meeting with moonrise. It is one of my faults that though my tongue is sometimes prompt enough at answer, there are times when it sadly fails me in framing an excuse, and always the lapse occurs at some crisis when a facile word or plausible pretext is especially wanted to get me out of painful embarrassment. I did not like to walk at this hour alone with Mr. Rochester in the shadowy orchard, but I could not find a reason to allege for leaving him. I followed with a lagging step, and thoughts busily bent on discovering a means of extrication. But he himself looked so composed and so grave also. I became ashamed of my feeling any confusion. The evil, if evil existent or perspective there was, seemed to lie with me only. His mind was unconscious and quiet. Jane, he recommenced as we entered the laurel walk and slowly strayed down in the direction of the sunk fence and the horse chestnut. Thornfield is a pleasant place in summer, is it not? Yes, sir. You must have become in some degree attached to the house, you who have an eye for natural beauties and a good deal of the organ of adhesiveness. I am attached to it, indeed. And though I don't comprehend how it is, I perceive you have acquired a degree of regard for that foolish little child Adele too, and even for simple Dame Fairfax. Yes, sir. In different ways. I have an affection for both. And would you be sorry to part with them? Yes. Pity, he said, and sighed. It is always the way of events in this life, he continued presently. No sooner have you got settled in a pleasant resting place than a voice calls out to you to rise and move on, for the hour of repose is expired. Must I move on, sir? Must I leave Thornfield? I believe you must, Jane. I'm sorry, Janet, but I believe indeed you must. This was a blow, but I did not let it prostrate me. Well, sir, I shall be ready when the order to march comes. It has come now. I must give it tonight. Then you are going to be married, sir? Exactly. Precisely. With your usual acuteness, you have hit the head. You have hit the nail straight on the head. Soon, sir. Very soon, that is, Miss Eyre. And you'll remember, Jane, the first time I, or rumor, plainly intimated to you that it was my intention to put my old bachelor's neck into the sacred noose, to enter into the holy state of matrimony, to make Miss Ingram to my to take Miss Ingram to my bosom. In short, she's an extensive armful, but that's not the point. One can't have too much of such a very excellent thing as my beautiful Blanche. Well, as I was saying, listen to me, Jane. You're not turning your head to look after more moths, are you? That was only a lady clock, child, flying away home. I wish to remind you that it was you who first said to me with that discretion I respect in you, with that foresight, prudence, and humility which befit your responsible and dependent position, that in case I married Miss Ingram, both you and little Adele had better trot forthwith. I pass over the sort of slur conveyed in the suggestion on the character of my beloved. Indeed, when you're far away, Janet, I'll try to forget it. I shall notice only its wisdom, which is such that I have made it my law of action. Adele must go to school, and you, Miss Eyre, must get a new situation. Yes, sir. I will advertise immediately. And meantime, I was going to say, I suppose I may stay here till I find another shelter to betake myself to. But I stopped, feeling it would not do to risk a long sentence, for my voice was not quite under command. In about a month, I hope to be a bridegroom, continued Mr. Rochester, and in the interim I shall myself look out for employment and an asylum for you. Thank you, sir. I am sorry to give— Oh, no need to apologize. I consider that when a dependent does her duty as well as you have done yours, she has a sort of claim upon her employer for any little assistance he can conveniently render her. Indeed, I have already, through my future mother-in-law, heard of a place that I think will suit. It is to undertake the education of the 5 daughters of Mrs. Dionysius Gull of Bitternut Lodge, Connaught, Ireland. You like Ireland, I think. There's such warm-hearted people there, they say. It is a long way off, sir. No matter. A girl of your sense will not object to the voyage or the distance. Not the voyage, but the distance. And then the sea is a barrier. From what, Jane? From England, and from Thornfield, and— Well, from you, sir. I said this almost involuntarily, and with as little sanction of free will, my tears gushed out. I did not cry so as to be heard, however. I avoided sobbing. The thought of Mrs. O'Gall and Bitternut Lodge struck cold to my heart, and colder the thought of all the brine and foam destined, as it seemed, to rush between me and the master at whose side I now walked, and cold is the remembrance of the wider ocean. Wealth, caste, custom intervened between me and what I naturally and inevitably loved. It is a long way, I again said. It is, to be sure, and when you get to Bitternut Lodge, Connaught, Ireland, I shall never see you again, Jane. That's morally certain. I never go over to Ireland, not having myself much of a fancy for the country. We have been good friends, Jane, have we not? Yes, sir. And when friends are on the eve of separation, they like to spend the little time that remains to them close to each other. Come, we'll talk over the voyage and departing quietly, half an hour or so, while the stars enter into their shining life up in heaven yonder. Here's the chestnut tree. Here's the bench at its old roots. Come, we will sit here in peace tonight, though we should never more be destined to sit there together. He seated me and himself. It is a long way to Ireland, Janet, and I am sorry to send my little friend on such weary travels. But if I can't do better, how is it to be helped? Are you anything akin to me, do you think, Jane? I could risk no sort of answer by this time. My heart was still. Because, he said, I sometimes have a queer feeling with regard to you, especially when you are near me as now. It is as if I had a string somewhere under my left ribs, tightly and inextricably knotted to a similar string situated in the corresponding quarter of your little frame. And if that boisterous channel and 200 miles or so of land come broad between us, I am afraid that cord of communion will be snapped, and then I've a nervous notion that I should take to bleeding inwardly. As for you, you'd forget me. That I never would. No, that I never should, sir. You know, impossible to proceed. Jane, do you hear that nightingale singing in the wood? Listen. In listening, I sobbed convulsively, for I could repress what I endured no longer. I was obliged to yield, and I was shaken from head to foot with acute distress. When I did speak, it was only to express an impetuous wish that I had never been born or never come to Thornfield. Because you're sorry to leave it? The vehemence of emotion stirred by grief and love within me was claiming mastery and struggling for full sway, and asserting a right to predominate, to overcome, to live, rise, and reign at last, yes, and to speak. I grieve to leave Thornfield. I love Thornfield. I love it because I have lived in it a full and delightful life, momentarily at least. I have not been trampled on. I have not been petrified. I have not been buried with inferior minds and excluded from every glimpse of communion with what is bright and energetic and high. I have talked face to face with what I reverence, with what I delight in, with an original, a vigorous, and expanded mind. I have known you, Mr. Rochester, and it strikes me with terror and anguish to feel I absolutely must be torn from you forever. I see the necessity of departure, and it is like looking on the necessity of death. Where do you see the necessity? He asked suddenly. Where? You, sir, have placed it before me. In what shape? In the shape of Miss Ingram, a noble and beautiful woman, your bride. My bride? What bride? I have no bride. But you will have. Yes, I will. I will. Then I must go. You have said it yourself. No, you must stay. I swear it, and the oath shall be kept. I tell you I must go, I retorted, roused to something like passion. Do you think I can stay to become nothing to you? Do you think I am an automaton, a machine without feelings, and can bear to have my morsel of bread snatched from my lips and my drop of living water dashed from my cup? Do you think because I am poor, obscure, plain, and little, I am soulless and heartless? You think wrong. I have as much soul as you, and full as much heart. And if God had gifted me with some beauty and much wealth, I should have made it as hard for you to leave me as it is now for me to leave you. I am not talking to you now through the medium of custom, conventionalities, not even of mortal flesh. It is my spirit that addresses your spirit, just as if both had passed through the grave and we stood at God's feet, equal, as we are. As we are, repeated Mr. Rochester. So, he added, enclosing me in his arms, gathering me to his breast, pressing his lips on my lips. So, Jane. Yes, so, sir, and yet not so. For you are a married man, or as good as a married man. And what to one inferior to you, to one with whom you have no sympathy, whom I do not even believe you truly love, for I have seen and heard you sneer at her. I would scorn such a union. Therefore I am better than you. Let me go. Where, Jane? To Ireland? Yes, to Ireland. Have spoken my mind and can go anywhere now. Jane, be still. Don't struggle so, like a frantic wild bird that is rendering its own plumage in its desperation. I am no bird, and no net ensnares me. I am a free human being with an independent will, which I now exert to leave you. Another effort set me at liberty, and I stood erect before him. And your will shall decide your destiny, he said. I offer you my hand, my heart, and a share of all my possessions. You play a farce which I merely laugh at. I ask you to pass through life at my side, to be my second self, and my best earthly companion. For that fate, you have already made your choice and must abide by it. Jane, be still a few moments. You're overexcited. I will be still, too. A waft of wind came sweeping down the laurel walk and trembled through the boughs of the chestnut. It wandered away, away, to an indefinite distance. It died. The nightingale's song was then the only voice of the hour. In listening to it, I again wept. Mr. Rochester sat quiet, looking at me gently and seriously. Some time passed before he spoke and said, Come to my side, Jane, and let us explain and understand one another. I will never come to your side. I am torn away now and cannot return. But Jane, I summon you as my wife. It is you only I intend to marry. I was silent. I thought he mocked me. Come, Jane, come hither. Your bride stands between us. He rose, and with a stride reached me. My bride is here, he said, again drawing me to him, because my equal is here, and my likeness. Jane, will you marry me? Still I did not answer, and still I writhed myself from his grasp, for I was still incredulous. Do you doubt me, Jane? Entirely. You have no faith in me. Not a whit. Am I a liar in your eyes? He asked passionately. Little sceptic, you shall be convinced. What love have I for Miss Ingram? None, and that you know. What love has she for me? None, as I have taken pains to prove. I caused a rumor to reach her that my fortune was not a third of what was supposed, and after that I presented myself to see the result. It was coldness, both from her and her mother. I would not, could not, marry Miss Ingram. You strange, you almost unearthly thing, I love as my own flesh. You, poor, obscure, and small and plain as you are, I entreat you to accept me as a husband. What? Me? I ejaculated, beginning in his earnestness, and especially in his incivility, to credit his sincerity. Me, who have not a friend in the world but you, if you are my friend, not a shilling but what you have given me? You, Jane, I must have you for my own, entirely my own. Will you be mine? Say yes quickly. Mr. Rochester, let me look at your face. Turn to the moonlight. Why? Because I want to read your countenance. Turn. There. You will find it scarcely more legible than a crumpled, scratched page. Read on. Only make haste, for I suffer. Water break. His face was very much agitated and very much flushed, and there were strong workings in the features and strange gleams in the eyes. Oh, Jane, you torture me, he exclaimed. With that searching and yet faithful and generous look, you torture me. How can I do that? If you are true, and your offer real, my only feelings to you must be gratitude and devotion. They cannot torture. Gratitude, he ejaculated, and added wildly, Jane, accept me quickly. Say Edward. Give me my name. Edward. Edward, I will marry you. Are you in earnest? Do you truly love me? Do you sincerely wish me to be your bride? I do, and if an oath is necessary to satisfy you, I swear it. Then, sir, I will marry you. Edward, my little wife. Dear Edward. Come to me. Come to me entirely now, said he, and added in his deepest tone, speaking in my ear as his cheek was laid on mine. Make my happiness. I will make yours. God pardon me, he subjoined ere long, and man meddle not with me. I have her and will hold her. There is no one to meddle, sir. I have no kindred to interfere. No, that is the best of it, he said. And if I had loved him less, I should have thought his accent and look of exultation savage. But sitting by him, roused from the nightmare of parting, called to the paradise of union, I thought only of the bliss given to me to drink in so abundant a flow. Again and again he said, Are you happy, Jane? And again I answered, Yes. After which he murmured, It will atone. It will atone. Have I not found her friendless and cold and comfortless? Will I not guard and cherish and solace her? Is there not love in my heart and constancy in my resolves? It will expiate at God's tribunal. I know my Maker sanctions what I do. For the world's judgment, I wash my hands thereof. For man's opinion, I defy it. But what had befallen the night? The moon was not yet set, and we were all in shadow. I could scarcely see my master's face, near as I was. And what ailed the chestnut tree? It writhed and groaned, while wind roared in the laurel walk and came sweeping over us. We must go in, said Mr. Rochester. The weather changes. I could have sat with thee till morning, Jane. And so, thought I, could I with you. I should have said so, perhaps, but a livid, vivid spark leapt out of a cloud at which I was looking, and there was a crack, a crash, and a close rattling peal. I thought only of hiding my dazzled eyes against Mr. Rochester's shoulder. The rain rushed down. He hurried me up the walk, through the grounds, and into the house, but we were quite wet before we could pass the threshold. He was taking off my shawl in the hall and shaking the water out of my loosened hair, when Mrs. Fairfax emerged from her room. I did not observe her at first, nor did Mr. Rochester. The lamp was lit. The clock was on the stroke of 12. Hasten to take off your wet things, he said, and before you go, good night. Good night, my darling. He kissed me repeatedly. When I looked up on leaving his arms, there stood the widow, pale, grave, and amazed. I only smiled at her and ran upstairs. Explanation will do for another time, thought I. Still, when I reached my chamber, I felt a pang at the idea she should even temporarily misconstrue what she had seen. But joy soon effaced every other feeling, and loud as the wind blew, near and deep as the thunder crashed, fierce and frequent as the lightning gleamed, cataract-like as the rain fell during a storm of 2 hours' duration, I experienced no fear and little awe. Mr. Rochester came thrice to my door in the course of it, to ask if I was safe and tranquil, and that was comfort. That was strength for anything. Before I left my bed in the morning, little Adele came running in to tell me that the great horse chestnut at the bottom of the orchard had been struck by lightning in the night, and half of it split away. End of chapter. Well, so we got to that part, you guys. I did not want to spoil those who hadn't read it, but I was really looking forward to getting through this chapter. Wow, I forgot. Okay, so I've been watching the adaptations over the years, and I had forgotten some of the lines that she said during the proposal scene. Dang, so much going on here. Let's kind of talk about it. So we have like two people, right? Again, Rochester's seems to like to play around with Jane. Like, what a jerk face. Honestly, he's been torturing her. This is why my sister said that he's an absolute cruel person. Yes, because he was using Blanche to make her jealous and to make her suffer. And then during the proposal scene, he's like, yeah, it's time to go. And he pushes her like emotionally until like she can stand it no longer. And she breaks down crying. Like, dude, that was really messed up. So that's anyway, I guess you could say all's well that ends well, because in the end he proposed and she's happy and they said yes and they're in love and everything seems to be going peachy and great. There are some things that are kind of like some issues that we don't yet know if they have been resolved. Remember, he has been alluding all this time to some capital error in the past. Probably he's fixed it while Jane has been away, but there's still something there, like about the judgment of people and it'll atone. Like, dude, what did you do? Jane, however, is too happy to really worry or ask about like what he's talking about, but he seems to be fixated on something. Nevertheless, they're getting married. He seems to be genuinely happy. He seems to genuinely love her. And you know, if this is what Jane wants, I'm happy for her. I wouldn't choose what Jane wants, but this is what she wants, and if that's what she wants and I love Jane, fine, as long as she's happy, safe, and content. Who am I to judge? Yeah, I know, little butterfly, I don't like him, and I get it, you don't like him. He's acting sus, he's been sus, he is sus. And you know what happened, and I think you already know the story, so but we won't go into details. Doesn't matter right now anyway. By the way, Rogelio Diaz, hello, happy to see you here. Greetings. So yes, we got a good amount of stuff right today. Also, let us not forget the symbolism here on this proposal scene. We have the great big tree at the end of the avenue where they were sitting, where he proposed to her. They were sitting on a bench at the tree. And then came a storm, like sudden storm, and then they went home while it was raining. But then overnight, lightning struck the tree and split it in half. Like, dude, that's an omen right there. Yeah. Also, but let's focus on the good things here. Crusher does point out, hooray, Jane is getting the good ending. Yes. Marriage in this era was definitely the best ending possible. So yeah, if this is the story, let's just say the end. But you guys, we are, let's see, 342 divided by 342 pages divided by 612 total pages. We are at 55% of the book, you guys. So we're not quite done with the story. If you like just straight up romance, this is probably your cue to leave the chat. But the story still goes on, because remember, Jane is still a young girl. Like, she's an adult, but she's so inexperienced with the ways of the world. She has met so few people, has not traveled much. So along comes this person who is rich, not handsome, but is handsome to her now. And they seem to have a good vibe, you know, they have chemistry. And in life, you will meet a lot of people with whom you have chemistry. And you will vibe. And you probably will fall in love and date them and whatnot. But that doesn't mean that they are the person for you. Especially somebody with red flags here. I don't know, like, there's plenty of red flags here. And poor Jane is not able to see them. Whew. Or she sees them, but the eyes of love, she says it herself, if I had not loved him as much as I did, I would have thought his expression or his facial features during the time, after, during that time, that he looked like savage, like there was something there, something not good. Hello, Crusher. It says, greetings from my job. Hello. Hope you're having lots of fun at work. And that you enjoy the rewatch. If you missed part of it or some of it. So what else did we want to talk about here? So again, he like I said before, he pushed her with this like stupid like fake story of him finding employment in Ireland. Now, it's not just the distance, you guys. Ireland, it really is far away from Thornfield, England, or whatever, from the main isle. And but worst about it is she would be a governess to 5 girls, and it was at the recommendation of Mrs. Ingram, of Blanche's mother. So do you really want to work for somebody who's been recommended to you by a woman so like heartless and cruel? Like, if it's like I don't want to work for anybody that she would recommend me to, honestly, because that just means that she would be like a friend of hers who would take on the same view about governessing as herself. She saw governesses as like horrible people that you could abuse, and so no doubt about it, her friend Mrs. O'Neill, or whatever her name was, from Bitternut Lodge, Ireland, she would be the same as her, or maybe not the same, but definitely there would be some kind of similarity in the way that they think. And honestly, Jane does not deserve that. I think it would be better for her in this situation to just find a place for herself. Yeah, advertise. Little Adele we'll see what happens now that Jane has accepted to become Rochester's wife. What is to become of little Adele? Since Jane is staying at Thornfield, is she going to still go to school or what? Interesting. Well, so yes, there's lots of questions still left to answer. Like, what's the deal with this, omen of bad luck where the chestnut tree was split in half by lightning? What's the deal with Rochester? Actually, Rochester, do you guys catch it, you guys? When she's like, he said, "Let no man meddle with me. I aim to keep her." And she said, "There's no one to meddle. I have no family." And then he's like, "Oh, yes, that is the best thing." Like, dude, what? But then again, Jane, you didn't tell him about your uncle, did you? Yeah, so she's not as unprotected as you think, Rochester, so don't, yeah. What did you mean by that is the best thing, that you don't have people to interfere and meddle? Maybe in this case she does need like somebody to interfere and meddle. Oh, Uncle John Eyre, come and save your niece. At least she needs to have her own money. Can you guys put off the wedding until she gets her own money, please? That way she can just, I don't know. That's just me thinking out loud, you guys. There's a lot of stuff gonna happen, so do be sure to join me on the next read-along. It'll be oodles of fun. Rogelio Diaz says, it's like getting a job in Europe while living in the USA, at least in the amount of time spent traveling. Kind of, yeah. Back then, a 50-mile journey, which one could make pretty easily here in like a few minutes. It took like a day, and geez. Yeah, it was quite an ordeal getting around back then, especially moving to such a different place. And politically too, Ireland was kind of like, it was almost like a colony of of England. The people in Ireland were treated horribly by the English people. So yeah, it seems like during that time, or at least in the mid to late 1800s, there was some unrest there for sure. So I don't know. Ireland is a beautiful country, but I don't know if I would move there by myself to live as a governess to 5 girls, who are the daughters of Mrs. Ingram's friend. I don't know, man. But thankfully, that's not going to happen. Or is it? You'll have to find out. Join me on Friday as we continue our read-along. Side note, did my car get fixed? Audrey! Yes, my car got fixed. When was it? I announced it sometime in March? Is it March or February when it got fixed? Yes, the Magmobile is fixed. I got my, what was the silly thing called? I forget the name of the thing. But yes, it did get fixed. Thanks in great part to you guys who helped me with it. You guys are amazing, and I really, really appreciate it. I guess I should plug my plugs while we're talking about that. Thank you for joining me today. If you want to support my channel, if you like this read-alongs and like to see more of this, just be sure to join me over on my Ko-fi, the Chattering Magpie. That is my Ko-fi page. I guess maybe people are waiting for another way to support me. Remember, this channel is not monetized, so I am getting $0.00 for your watch time. You don't have to pay to watch, of course not, but if you like to support me, you can with either a one-time donation, or you can become a member. If you become a member, there are several tiers. There's a $5 tier, or you could become, a Zent, that is the highest tier. And if whichever tier you join, you have access to my Discord server. It's private and only open to nestlings who support the channel. We have events coming up. Let's see what we have. We have a recording. We have an anime movie night. We have, Hamilton watch party. Yes. So Saturday nights, Patrick is hosting watch parties of anime. Check it out. This week they'll be watching Whisper of the Heart, which is the very first Ghibli movie I watched, and it is my favorite Ghibli movie, though that's saying something because the Ghibli movies are amazing. So do check it out. I won't be able to join, but the gang does have an amazing time when we watch stuff. I did schedule a Hamilton watch party just because I am a big fan of Hamilton, or at least I was. Well, I still like it. I just don't listen to the soundtrack 24/7 like I used to back in 2016. But it's a good show. We're gonna watch it. Somebody's gonna stream it. Teal's gonna stream it, and it'll be oodles of fun. So anyway, join our little community. We have events coming up. Oh, and I forgot memes. Little purple butterflies memes. So let's do this. The Sound of Music. Oh yes. We have Blanche Ingram and Mr. Rochester. By the way, this lady, I forget her name, the actress' name, but dang, she was one icon. But the biggest icon, you guys, it's this actor. I forget what his name is. He is the icon. He is definitely, yeah, I have an obsession. The look he gives Jane when she enters the room, right? Yeah, when I watched The Sound of Music for the first time, you guys, I still did not know any English. Yes, you guys, it was, I don't know, I was 9 years old. And something happened when I looked at this guy. I don't know, I just thought he was very dashing. Like, get your mind out of the gutter. I was just like, wow, so that's what a man looks like, right? Yeah. Yeah, I was very struck by him. So yeah. Thank you, little purple butterfly, for reminding me of the things that really matter. Now we have the conversation Rochester's dead family has after his gypsy prank. Oh, a Mulan reference, yes. Had to be a cross-dress. Yeah, Edward Rochester has had many adventures in his life. And yeah, he should definitely take up acupuncture next. I could use a good acupuncturist, you guys. I woke up with a headache today. But not enough to actually get near to cancel or postpone the read along, but it did, my head did hurt, so I had to get a shoulder massage, and yeah, I feel a little better. Yes, the Audrey Lascelles, yes, it was the catalytic converter. Yes, got the part, it got fixed, everything is good. And then Crusher says, bruh, Whisper of the Heart is so unfair. Why is it unfair? Tell me why it is unfair. Tell me, I want to know. Caution, do not go to the 3rd floor alone. Oh, little butterfly, you never miss with these memes. Thank you. I love it. I love it so much. You guys, if you enjoy these videos, these read-alongs, do share these. Spread the word. I'm going to be uploading just original content for this channel, so it's not always going to be just lives. I do have some ideas for shorts and little videos, so just hang in there, you guys. I am working on so many things, both for this channel and the other channel, so please bear with me. I will upload some good content for you here. I'm full of ideas of where we can take this channel, but for now we're just doing lives. Do share with people and spread the word. That way I can reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year and be monetized. Yes, it would be lovely to be monetized here. It would be spoiler territory, but the couple deserves so much more. Yes, yes. Be careful with the spoilers. We'll see. We will see. All right, everybody. It's lovely talking to you guys. I will let you get back to your day, to your studying, to your work, to your lunch. I am off to work. Woohoo. I'll see you guys later. Bye.